Welcome to the Afterspin, opinions from thought leaders in our state. I want to ask Becki Gray and Chris Fitzsimon, removing statues and renaming buildings named for segregationists and slave owners has filled the news a lot lately. George Washington, for instance, owned slaves. Should his name be taken down? What criteria should we use in deciding which ones should and should not remain? Becki?
Well, I think the first criteria that we have to adhere to is the rule of law and the process that is in place to make these decisions. I think that what we've seen with these late night mobs that have vandalized and destroyed property on public grounds around the Capitol. We've seen it around the country. I think that cannot be tolerated. The way that we go through this, and there's a reason why we have laws. There's a reason why we have deliberative bodies. There's a reason why we elect people to make decisions. There's a forum with, we have a right to free speech. We have a right to debate. We have a right to write op-eds, and all of those kind of things are at our disposal. So I think the first criteria has to be that you follow the rule of law and that you don't let mob rule take over. And then, to have these discussions about, what place do these people, what place does this history have, as we move forward. And I think it's an important discussion to have. I think it's one that we need to continue to have. And, do you go back and do you consider each of those individuals and what they contributed, what their overall contributions and those kind of things.
But Chris, there are a number of people who are saying, wait a minute, the legislature passed a bill in 2015, set up this historical commission, that nothing has happened since 2015, and it's time. Your take on all this?
The legislature made it harder for local governments and other people to take down monuments that some of their constituents thought was offensive. And I guess I'm sympathetic to worrying about mobs and violence. I'm sympathetic to all that on the one hand. On the other hand, we have asked African Americans for more than 100 years to walk by statues of people who are famous for treason, for taking up arms against the United States of America to defend owning other human beings who had black skin. Think about that for a second and what that has been like. They have tried and tried and tried and tried to have a sane conversation. They've tried with gerrymandered districts. They tried when they weren't allowed to vote. They've tried when they were targeted with surgical precision based on their race. They've tried with all sorts of things. And then we are surprised that people are frustrated when people are killed because they're black by police officers. And then they're frustrated and want to point out that we have monuments, not just to slave owners, but for people who took up arms against the country to defend the right to own human beings. I can't emphasize that enough. Eugene Robinson, the columnist of the Washington Post, had a great column the other day, who's African-American, a Pulitzer Prize winner, saying, why in the world did we ever put up monuments 60, 70 years after the Civil War to honor people who took up arms against the country to own other human beings? It is simply stunning, and it's taken us this long to come to grips with that as a society.
Becki, I think you make a good point, though. I think this is indicative, this problem with statues and buildings and so forth, indicative of the fact that we never have really had an honest discussion that led to any conclusions regarding racial matters in our state and our nation. And it is time for us to sit down and have some meaningful discussion. But that's got to be a two-way street, doesn't it?
Of course it does. And Tom, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I think that we have had discussions. We've had discussions for years. Why haven't we moved past this? Why haven't we gotten any further? I think that's really what we need to examine. And, I think that many of the points that Chris brought forward, I think are important things to talk about, to teach our young people, and to learn from. And if you destroy all of that, I think that it eliminates the basis of what we need to talk about. And so as far as the monuments and those kind of things, I've said, consistently, I think we should have more rather than fewer. And I think the really important thing is there needs to be context with that so that it offers a place, an environment to talk about and think about what has happened, what have been the mistakes that have made through history, and how can we ensure that that never happens again.
You think that's ever going to happen, Chris?
Well, I don't know. I think this is as Reverend Barbara says, this is a movement now, not a moment. I don't think this is going to go away. I think it's going to be a major issue. I think society is changing, especially generationally. A lot of the people in the streets, by the way, are not African American. They're of all races. and they're all marching to say the same thing, that we need to change things. Obviously, any protest movement could go too far in some people's minds, but that's the way we didn't have the civil rights movement because everybody said, let's have an honest debate about it. Because we had it because Martin Luther King and John Lewis marched across a bridge and would refuse to get up from restaurants when they weren't served. Change is hard. Giving up power is hard. And we're having a moment in our country where all of our leaders need to come to grips with, let's have a more fair and equitable society.
And of course, this comes at a time when not only do we have this discussion, we've got elections taking place, we've got a pandemic taking place. I guess history's not convenient, is it?
Well, I think it's very convenient. And I think, if you look back at the way that our country was founded, it was on equality. It was for freedom. It was equal treatment for all people.
Except some of our people were 3/5 of a person. That's the entire point. When our country was founded, African Americans were considered 3/5 of a person. That's exactly the point.
Well, and let's go back and let's look at that. And, I think we are uniquely positioned as a country to address this and to make real inroads with it and to make a difference because, again, freedom and equality.
All right. Well, thanks for watching the After Spin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.